Wouldn't it be nice to have several thought leaders in your industry know and love your brand? Start a podcast. Invite your industry's thought leaders to be guests on your show, and start reaping the benefits of having a network full of industry influencers. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Category Creation Series on the B2B Growth Show. I'm John Rougeux. To kick off this 12th episode in the Category Creation Series, I have just 3 words for you. Follow your different. That's what our guest, Christopher Lochhead, wants us to think about when approaching category design. Now, if you don't know about Chris, you absolutely should. Not only has he written the book that every aspiring category designer needs to read called Play Bigger, but he's also the host of a top 30 rated podcast, a #1 Amazon best-selling author, and a former 3-time Silicon Valley CMO with at least 1 IPO to his name. Chris is also an advisor to over 50 venture-backed startups. Wow. Not only is Chris super accomplished, but he's an ultra nice guy, and we had a really fun conversation. Now, Chris's advice on category design is pretty extensive, so we've broken his interview into 2 parts. This is part 1, and here's what you're going to learn from Chris in the next 30 minutes. Number 1, why Chris thinks category design is a marketing superpower. Number 2, why the category kings tend to capture 76% of a market's economics on average. And number 3, what the 3 pillars of a legendary company are. Sound good? Then let's fire up part 1 of our interview with Chris Lochhead. Chris, welcome to the show today. So great that you could be with me today.
John, thank you for having me on. I'm stoked to be here.
Yeah. You know, as a student of category design, just getting to interview you is pretty humbling. It's a huge honor. And I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be with me.
Well, I can't thank you enough for having me. And I'm a student of category design too.
Well, I think it's safe to say that you're a little bit further ahead of me, but we've got a lot to talk about in that regard. But before we dive into things, I got to ask you, Chris. You wrote this book with a few others called Play Bigger, and one of the authors described you as the Bruce Willis of CMOs, or like the Bruce Willis if you were a CMO in the Die Hard movies. So I want to ask you, is that your superhero? Is that your action hero of choice, or was that kind of thrust upon you?
It's funny, I forgot that. Yeah, Kevin Maney wrote that, which is very fun, I guess. I mean, my superhero as a kid and even today as an adult that I related to more was always Batman. And Bruce Willis was not famous when I was a kid. But it's hard not to love, particularly the first Die Hard movie.
You haven't gotten any glass in your feet in your marketing career, though, I hope.
I've gotten a lot of glass in my feet in my marketing career, and I've had a lot of people shoot at me and call me names and try to kill me and wish ill upon me. So I relate to that part of it, and I've left a lot of blood, sweat, and tears on the marketing startup battlefield, so to speak.
Right. Well, speaking of blood, sweat, and tears, you've built a major consulting company called Scient during the .com boom. I think you once hired a couple thousand people in just 3 years.
Yep.
Later, you helped reposition Macromedia before Adobe made that acquisition. And you even turned a software company called Mercury Interactive from a $1 billion company to a $5 billion company. So maybe to give us some context for the interview today, can you just give me a little bit more about your 30 years of marketing experience and how that brought you to where you are today?
Sure. So as you said, I've done 3 tours of duty as a public company tech CMO in Silicon Valley. And I got started pretty early on, John. I got thrown out of school at 18 for failing out and being stupid. And so I, like a lot of entrepreneurs, for me, entrepreneurship was not a way up in the world necessarily, but a way out, a way out of a life of struggle. And I think for a lot of us entrepreneurs, we start a company because no one else will bet on our future because there's no evidence that betting on us makes any sense at all. And so, in a lot of ways, entrepreneurship is a way to bet on yourself. And so I very early on bet on myself and started my first company at 18. And then by the time I was 27, 28, I was here in Silicon Valley, and I was the head of marketing for a publicly traded software company, a firm called Vantiv at the time. And, just onward and upward since then. And then by 38, after we sold Mercury to Hewlett Packard, I just decided it was time to hang them up. And since then, I've been doing some advisor, board consulting type stuff. And then, as you know, most recently, in the last couple of years, have kind of reinvented myself as an author and a podcaster.
Yeah, and you've written a couple books that are pretty widely circulated, at least among the crowd that I speak to, Niche Down and Play Bigger. Can you give me a quick kind of rundown of those two?
Yeah, both books are about this concept, this new strategy in business called category design. And Play Bigger is more for, if you want to think of them this way, biggie entrepreneurs. That is to say, I raise a bunch of money. I'm trying to grow really fast. I'm trying to design a new category that I can dominate and become the next Cisco, Google, Oracle, Facebook, etc. And then my second book, Niche Down, is about the same concept of category design, but applied to, if you will, a smallie entrepreneur. I just opened a pizza parlor, or I'm a flower shop, or I'm a restaurant, or as we have here in, I live in Santa Cruz, California, we seem to have a new craft brew pub opening every 15 minutes in town. So for those entrepreneurs who, save up a little bit of money, maybe borrow a little bit of money from their Uncle Steve or whatever, and are hanging out a shingle. So Niche Down is for smallie entrepreneurs, a category, and Play Bigger is for biggie entrepreneurs and how they can do the same thing.
Okay, yeah. So you've written two books. You've had a pretty long marketing career, lots of different experiences. And I believe you have been referred to as kind of a sensei in the marketing space. Is that how you describe yourself, or should we call you something else, Chris?
Well, some people have pejorative things to call me, but look, I don't know. That's for other people to decide. I'm a guy who, like a lot of marketers, like a lot of entrepreneurs, got into business because it was a way for me to bet on my future when nobody else would. And so I had nothing to lose. And I've learned a lot of things along the way, some from reading, some from mentors, and of course, a lot from trial and error. And, so look, I think I'm just like a lot of marketers. We get out there in the world and we're trying to design and dominate new categories and build great companies. And I love technology, and I came to Silicon Valley from Canada. And like a lot of immigrants, Silicon Valley has been an amazing place for me. And so the aha, though, for me in this regard, John, is, my whole career, I was the youngest guy in the room, because I started at 18. I was the CMO of a public company at 27, 28. And I never thought I would be doing anything other than that, being the guy who was working hard 60 to 80 hours a week, traveling all over the place. I used to travel 200,000 to 400,000 miles a year. And, I was the up and coming guy, right?
Yeah.
And sort of the interesting thing is you get to a place in your career where you wake up one day and you go, oh, you're not the up and coming guy anymore. You're now the been there, done that guy. And so I'm a been there, done that guy. And of course, I'm still trying to learn, just like you, I'm a category design student.
Yeah. Well, so real quick, just to give us more context, best moment as a marketer, worst moment as a marketer?
I've had so many best moments as a marketer. Look, you can't beat going public, standing there at NASDAQ, pushing a button, as I got to do at Scient. And, I joined that company as the founding CMO, and we were 30 something people. And, we got to well over 2,000 people, and we designed and dominated a space. And that's incredibly exciting. And so experiences like that are amazing. At Mercury, we got into a massive amount of trouble, and our stock cratered, and we had to fire our CEO, CFO, and general counsel in one day. And the whole company almost blew up. And that happened in November. And our stock went from the mid 40s to the low 20s. And, It was incredibly challenging. And then fast forward to June, July of the next year, we sold the company to Hewlett Packard for $5 billion. That was a pretty good day. And then I'll tell you, as a kid with no education, I essentially got thrown out of high school. I'm dyslexic and have some number of these other learning differences. To sit there and be the first authors to launch a book at NASDAQ on Facebook Live in front of almost 500,000 people in the NASDAQ recording studios in Times Square. That was an amazing experience. And the other one today that's probably maybe a little less dramatic than that, but it's rare for me today, John, to go a day without somebody sending me an email or a tweet or a LinkedIn or something saying that one of my books or one of my podcasts made a difference for them in their life. And that maybe isn't quite the big thrill of hitting the NASDAQ button or becoming a number one bestseller. But when you get to the stage of life that I'm at, all I really want to do today, John, is have a very good time and make a very big difference. And so it's insanely rewarding knowing that other people say I'm making a difference for them in their careers and in their business. And the fact that, somebody lets me know that on a pretty regular basis, that's probably the greatest reward that I could imagine for having a 30-year career like I've had.
Absolutely. I can imagine that. And hopefully after we share this episode, you'll get a few more of those emails and phone calls kind of thanking you for your expertise. And, you've talked about category design. Your books are on that kind of thought process. So maybe to kind of dive into that topic a little bit further, just kind of start us off by telling us what category design is and why should marketers and entrepreneurs care about it?
Yeah. So it's, my writing partner, Kevin Maney, says that category design is a new lens on business. And once you have the lens, you have really, I think, an unfair competitive advantage. I don't know if you saw the movie Taken with Liam Neeson.
No, I haven't.
It's a great movie about a guy who's a former, I don't know if he's CIA, but he's a former badass black ops kind of a guy, and these bad guys kidnap his daughter. There's a scene in the movie where he's on the phone with the bad guys, and he says, then they say they want a lot of money to get his daughter back, and he says, "Look, I don't have a lot of money, but what I do have is a very special set of skills honed over a long career that make me a really big problem for people like you." And so I think category design is a very special set of skills that for marketers and entrepreneurs give them an unfair competitive advantage. And here's why. Most people believe in an unchallenged way that the best product wins. Most people believe that if we can expose the world to our product or our service, that we're going to win. And most people sort of treat the market like they treat the weather, right? So you wake up in the morning and I say, well, what's the weather going to be in Northern California today? It's going to be sunny. It's going to be this. It's going to be that. And they treat the market like it is the way that it is. And the first big aha is that categories, markets, behave the way they do because somebody designed them that way, either on accident or intentionally. And I'll give you a simple example. And if you take a big step back and start thinking about, well, why is it that this is the way that it is in our space? A simple example that I can relate to is in the United States of America, a high-end pair of sunglasses is about $300 to $400. And a pretty good, medium-sized flat screen TV at Costco is $150 to $250. Now, if you were an alien and somebody said to you, hey, John, there's this one category of products that is a piece of plastic that you put on your eyes to make you less sensitive to the sun. And then there's this other category of products that is a technological marvel that talks to satellites in space and delivers, 100,000 channels, or certainly feels that way, of news and information and entertainment. Which category of product is $400 and which category of product is $250? Most people would say, well, it must be the technological marvel that talks to satellites in space, when of course it's not.
Sure.
And so category design is really about why are categories the way they are? who set it up, and most importantly, what problem and therefore what solution matters. And the big aha goes like this. The company that designs the category is best positioned to dominate it. And in Play Bigger, we did a big data science research project where we analyzed every venture-backed technology startup founded in the United States from 2000 to 2015. And we asked the data set, what percentage of total value created in any given category goes to the market leader, or what you could think of as the category queen or the category king. And it turns out the answer to that question, and we wrote an article for the HBR about this, is 76%. So 2/3 of the economics in any given market category goes to the category queen. And so what's my point? The aha is most of us embark on a battle of competition. Legends don't do that. Legends proactively position themselves as different and unique and design a new way of thinking about a problem and therefore a solution that meaningfully advantages them and is a meaningful disadvantage to anybody that comes after them. And so the big aha is the most legendary marketers, the most legendary CEOs, the most legendary company founders, and frankly, the people in the world that make the biggest difference, and we can talk about how this plays outside of business if you want, are the ones that do three things. One, they design a legendary product. Two, they design a legendary company. And three, and this is the part that most people don't get, they design a legendary category. And when they do that, they proactively position themselves to be the company that takes 2/3 of the economics. So what Play Bigger is about, what Niche Down is about, is this discipline of category design, trying to unpack what are the things that the most legendary leaders in business history have done intuitively to teach the world how to think differently. And when the world agrees with the way you think, bam, they literally line up in front of your building to get whatever it is that you're selling. And fundamentally, that's what category design's about.
So you talked about those three kind of pillars coming together at roughly the same time: a great company, a great product, and a great category. And I think those first two, there's a lot of literature around how to design great products. There's a ton around company culture and how to design a great team. But it seems like the topic of category design, it's not really been talked about in depth as much as those other kind of two pillars that you mentioned. Why do you think that's the case, Chris?
Because I think that we live in a world where we get taught that the most legendary entrepreneurs, the most legendary companies are innovators, right? Christensen wrote The Innovator's Dilemma. And what most people hear when they hear that is product innovation, right? So you ask most people, why did Apple beat BlackBerry? Most people are going to say, well, the iPhone's just a way better product. And so that's where everybody focuses. And what I would say to you is the statement, the iPhone is a better product, is A, an interpretation, B, not true, because it's an interpretation. To quote the Big Lebowski, that's just like your opinion, man.
Right.
And
it's
so
not an objective measurement.
It's not. And so what category design asks is, how do you teach the world to see things the way you do?
No. So if you were research in motion and you were, I guess if you could go back in time and kind of lead that company, what would you have done differently then to kind of position the BlackBerry as that category the category king, and to kind of position any Apples or other efforts as kind of a secondary player within that space?
Yeah, so the category king or queen stays in their position as long as the world agrees with the definition of the problem and the solution. And so BlackBerry's problem was they did not continue to evangelize the raison d'etre for the BlackBerry. Or said in a different way, when the design of the smartphone category was, it's a mobile untethered device whose primary use case is email and phone, then the BlackBerry won. When the design of the category gets changed, that is to say, the RFP for what most people agree a smartphone is moves from the BlackBerry definition to a definition called, it's a magical Star Trek-like device that has all these apps. If you remember in the beginning, what made the iPhone go, they had this mantra that they used. They said, there's an app for that, right? And so when it became about apps, not about email, they were done.
Mhm.
And so they lost not just a product battle, but the truth is the main thing they lost was a battle for what the definition of a smartphone was. And when enough people agreed with Apple, it was over. And in point of fact, as far as I'm concerned, for email, the BlackBerry was and still is the better device. And I'm a big guy. I have big hands, and using a tactile keyboard that I can feel with my thumbs is a much more effective way to do email than using a non-tactile device where I would say probably 1 in 4 times when I hit a letter with my thumb, it's the wrong letter. So in other words, if the use case is email, BlackBerry crushes the iPhone, but Jobs and Apple got the world to interpret what a smartphone should be as something meaningfully, and I'm going to use this word on purpose, John, different than what the definition was before. And when enough people agreed with their, what I would call category design of what a smartphone is, bam, it was over. And at that point, there was nothing BlackBerry could have done.
Mm. So if someone was listening to you kind of lay out those two examples and they were a little skeptical, they might say something like, well, those are consumer products and there's so much advertising and marketing and they're serving such mass markets that it doesn't really apply. People don't buy phones based on speeds and fees. They buy it for emotional reasons. It's kind of a aspirational purchase, for an iPhone, especially when they're, nearing $1,000. But again, the skeptical person might say, well, but in the B2B space, people are more rational. They're doing product research. They have, committees who are buying these products and services, and they're taking a more thorough, objective, kind of measured look at what the capabilities of each product is. Now, I know you're going to tell me that that's not true, but I want to hear why that's the case and why that skepticism is kind of unfounded.
Well, the first thing I'd say is if you think that B2B products are purchased based on any kind of analytics, any kind of objective RFP process, you're effed. You're finished. Because it turns out there's no difference between the way human beings buy consumer products and B2B products. And you can set up the biggest evaluation committee you want. Those evaluation committees are put in place to justify the emotional decision that has already been made. And if you don't think that's true, you're not going to have a very long or successful career in B2B marketing. That's just the reality of it. And I know that might sound harsh, but I've been doing this for 30 years. And here's the aha. In every RFP situation, who would you rather be? The company responding to the RFP or the company that helped the company, or the vendor who helped the customer write the RFP? Because there's no such thing as an RFP that isn't meaningfully influenced by the agenda of a vendor of one sort or another. And that's because people already decide what they want to buy. And then they use the RFP process to justify it. And sure, are there times where there's a front runner and the folks on the buying side think they're going to buy from company A and they end up buying from company B? Sure. But that probably happens less than 10% of the time. They already know when the cycle begins. That's the first piece. The second piece is what category design is really about. It's about writing the RFP for the space. You're telling everybody, if you want to buy, this type of product or service, this is what you should be looking for. So, for example, Mark Benioff is arguably the greatest category designer of the last 20 years in the B2B space. When he started, he was exactly the opposite of where the entire technology space was at the time. He said, don't buy it, rent it, and don't run it in your data center, run it in our data center. And just put your data about your customers and your salespeople and your forecast on our servers, and we'll take care of that for you. That was 180 degrees away from where the category was. That man single-handedly made the cloud happen because he taught the world how to think about computing in a completely new way, and he designed a new category. He moved the world from the way it was to the way he wanted it to be. And that's what legendary category designers do. And that's what legendary people do on a sale by sale basis. And if you're really smart, you move the entire market category from where it is to the way you want it to be. And that's what's required. And you can compete on speeds and feeds all you want, but if somebody else has tilted the design, tilted the agenda, has and I'm going to say these words on purpose, different point of view about what the carbidingulator space should be, you will be BlackBerry, not Apple. And that's just the truth. And the data supports it. 2/3 of the economics go to one company. That's been validated by the Harvard Business Review. And look, you can deny that all you want, and I wish you a lot of luck, but you're probably going to burn a lot of money, and you're probably going to cause yourself a lot of heartache living inside that paradigm. And if that's what you want to go do, then you can go bang your head into that wall, and legendary entrepreneurs will be busy designing what we call the magic triangle, getting product, company, and category right.
So you talk about this idea of designing a category and the economics of that and all the reasons why that's worth pursuing. So what does that process look like? You've been through this a few times yourself, haven't you?
Over 50, yeah.
Yeah. So what does that kind of look like? We don't need to go through like a step-by-step, A to Z, but like what are some of the big pieces that have to happen for category design to actually be something that you're doing successfully?
So the first question to ask yourself is, what makes me, either as an individual in your career or me as a company, or us as a company, depending on how you want to think about it. So what makes us different? And specifically, how do I think about a problem and therefore a solution in a different way? And so, for example, there's this company called Rougeux Industries, and they are the creators of a new category of soap that emerged about 50 years ago. Before that, there was just what today we call bar soap. And they thought that was gross because it's nasty and it can be full of hair and full of dirt. And so they reimagined the problem called, how do I clean my hands without having to deal with a yucky, gross bar of soap? And Rougeux Industries therefore created liquid soap, a new category of soap, and then repositioned as a result of that traditional soap as hand soap or bar soap. Fast forward to the mid-90s, many decades after they had done that, by staying focused on the problem, that is to say, how do I want to think about cleaning my hands? They tilted the agenda one more time. They said, the problem with liquid soap is I need water. So how do I wash my hands? How do I get my hands clean in the absence of water? And Rougeux Industries created a product that we now all know called Purell, and a new category called hand sanitizer. And that was in the mid to late 90s. And prior to the mid to late 90s, nobody was walking around going, hey, John, I got this big problem called hand sanitization. Nobody thought about that. Nobody, zero. There was no a box on the wall of every hospital in the world with squeezy stuff coming out of it to rub on your hands. There were no moms walking around with strollers with a tub of this stuff that they bathed their baby in 3 times a day, right? And so my point is this: Rougeux Industries, by continuously focusing on the problem called how do I clean my hands and how do I clean my hands in what you and I today would call multiple use case situations, have continuously done category design around their product innovation. And now there's not a parent in the world that wouldn't have this stuff on them to clean their baby, right? And so that's really the point. The point is legendary companies stay focused on the problem, stay focused on how they want to address problems in different ways. And when the world sees the problem the way they do, then the world wants the solution. And the big marketing aha is they don't market their product. Legends market the problem because they understand the bigger, the more urgent, the more strategic the problem, the more time, money, and energy people will apply to solving that problem. And if you're the company setting that agenda with what you could think of as a point of view, then you're going to be the company that is the category designer. And if you can pull off all 3 components, product, company, and category at the same time, bam, that's how you get to be Cisco. That's how you get to be WhatsApp. That's how you get to be Rougeux Industries.
Okay, well, that wraps up part 1 of our conversation with Chris Lochhead. If you enjoyed learning from Chris, then you absolutely need to look out for part 2, because when we come back, we'll hear Chris tell us why he believes Pepsi's attempt to unseat Coke as the category king is one of the dumbest marketing efforts ever. We'll hear what Picasso can teach marketers about the importance of being different. And we'll hear Chris explain why trying to convince people that you're better than something else can actually work against you. Thanks for listening today. I'm John Rougeux, and I'll see you back here shortly for part 2 of our interview with Chris Lochhead.
Digital marketing agencies have a tough job. You have to stay on top of the latest marketing strategies for your clients and your agency. What if there was a way you could address both at the same time? Imagine your agency putting out content with greater quality and quantity. Envision bringing your clients a turnkey solution for one of B2B marketing's fastest growing media strategies, podcasting. You know, all those clients asking for your help with their account-based marketing efforts? Picture being the first to bring them the idea of content-based networking, showing them the proven strategy for breaking into their most coveted accounts. Here's the concept. Sweetfish Media is looking to work with a limited number of innovative agencies interested in a new partnership model. We produce a podcast for your agency. You introduce the power of podcasting and Sweetfish services to your clients. Everybody wins. Learn more at sweetfishpartners.com.